Welcome everyone. This is our, what is this? Our sixth or seventh image review? Eighth?
Seventh.
Seven?
Yeah.
Image review number 7, National Parks at Night. And we've got an excellent selection of images to look at, explore tonight. So I want to thank you. We have several of our participants here in the Zoom room. We're live streaming out to YouTube so everyone can check it out. And guys, again, remember we do this every Thursday. So if you want some feedback on your night images, again, we're not doing any daytime image reviews here, but if you want any image feedback on your night images, send them in to us, and we will. We need them by, let's see, we need them by 12 p.m. usually on Thursday. And we'll also make sure to drop the link in the chat and also put it in here at the end for where you go. Okay. So tonight we have myself, Gabriel Biederman, and Tim Cooper from National Parks at Night.
Hello, everybody.
And we'll be giving our a in-depth look at some of our submissions here from the people. All right. Tim, anything you'd like to add?
No, just thanks for everybody for joining. Thanks y'all for sending the images in. It allows us to have fun and see you guys, and it makes my day. So thank you.
Excellent. And I see that Sue and Julianne are in the YouTube, but not yet. Or Sue's having troubles with the Zoom. So
okay,
we'll give it to you. You'll get it about 2 seconds later than everyone else. But even if you're in just the YouTube, it's all good. All right. So how's everyone doing?
Yeah, how are y'all doing?
Good.
Are we getting enough time to process our images?
No, I think they're Vince, you working on images?
Yep.
What are you doing?
Yeah, I am. I'm reprocessing some old images, and also taking some of your guys' lead, and I've been doing some shooting in the apartment, and then and then kind of off the balcony into the city too. So trying to keep my my night photography skills sharper and keep improving them. Yeah.
Good. Awesome. Well, Gabriel, you want to start us off with the first critique?
Yes, I will. It's one I'm actually kind of excited. As soon as I saw it, I said, ooh, let me get a book because it reminds me of an image. And Vince, keep your audio on. And we just ask that the people who are being reviewed, you turn your audio on while we review it, just so you can give us any, we can talk and chat about anything. We can understand your process a little bit more. But Vince, I think you're up with an urban shot. And let me share my screen. And we're going to go to the Lightroom. And here we go. And all right. Everyone can see. And we're going to go.
Yes, sir.
So if you don't know, Vince, can I share that you live in Chicago? Oh, I just did. Oops, sorry.
Yep. Sorry, Brett. See, there's a Packer fan in the.
He's wearing his colors tonight too. Jeez. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
but
so this is in Chicago.
And is this just right outside that little window I see right there?
Yes. Yep.
Cool. So great view. This is a perfect, I love these kind of this is a great interpretation of the urban landscape, what we have in front of us. I remember a friend of mine, David Brommer, had a beautiful view of the Empire State Building. It was at 33rd and 9th Avenue. And then a building like this came right up in front of it. And all he could see was the needle after that. But this view is actually even better because how many channels of television do we now have? With this, it's just like every window is a story here. And this is so fun to kind of just peruse over, and it's like the colors. This is taken, I really just like the light here, and it's very well controlled. Looks like a lot of office space here,
Yep.
but like this reflection kind of going on over here. But the mixture of the cool, this row of warmth right here is really making it. Because if it was all blue, I mean, it would just be a different story. And this one warm line just really kind of, I think, adds a nice contrast to it. And then if we look below here, then it's like, you know, all these other warmer or LED, lights in there. And over here, I mean, this is just such a rear window, right? You could spend hours, looking at this. And what I want to say is, when you do a shot like this, first off, obviously we gotta get those lines right. And it looks like you've done a pretty good job here. I think, and one of the lines I'm going to look at. All right, we got a top line over here. We got all these lines looks pretty straight. Now, maybe it just needs a smidge more, because if we look at sort of that height difference, it's going up slightly, right? And we're seeing that lip down here, but not down there. So that might need just a slight little adjustment. And then for this, when I usually do that, I just kind of really use the arrow keys and really just dial that in. Hold on, and we can use the lines that come up now to help us with that. And that looks a little bit better, I think. It is hard to tell. There we go. Yeah.
Is that one of the overlays, Gabe? When
that
you're
was
doing the crop or the...
Yeah, exactly. So when you go to the crop, and then when you start using the arrows, when you click in here, and then you start using the arrows, you get really, I love this grid for cropping. Tim, I don't know if they call it something more specific, but it's really, now you can find that straight line anywhere, right? I could find the straight line here, and then I could look at, you have something that's got a line going all the way across. So we can really align this line with the line that's in the building. So, and that really ended up being just a 0.10. It was, obviously that's us being nitpicky, but that is important when you've got strong lines in there. We want to make sure, and you want to make them straight here for this image, that we really just nail it. These shots could be really tricky, but all your lighting is very well controlled here, right? So I really can't fault that, but a lot of times people can really need maybe a little bit, sometimes have to do some HDR to kind of balance it. And I think you just, all you went up is a 10 points on clarity, which I think that's kind of smart. You did some little adjusting right there. I think it's very well composed. I might just see, maybe a little bit of texture too, just kind of makes it pop a little bit, just a touch more. But I really like this. So I wanted to take a moment also. I'm going to stop sharing because I wanted to share with you this book that it really made me think of. I've had this book for many years. This is Michael Wolff. And so,
there you go.
Yeah. And it's all, it's New York. There you go. It's New York, Chicago, but all sorts of images like this. And it's a beautiful book. It's Aperture made it. It's an 11x14 book. It's called The Transparent City. So if you're, if you want to, if you're obviously getting into some of this stuff, I might recommend picking up this book. It'll kind of lead you down a rabbit hole of exploring all the windows of the world that are in front of you. And there's now when we add, you don't have any people in yours, which is fine. But then when we do add the people in there, that adds another element. And now we're talking about capturing those moments now of when people are moving everywhere and doing all that stuff. So I hope it's a great shot, and I hope it's the first shot that leads to a possible series and maybe even a book.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Gabe. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. I just want to remind everybody that if you guys have questions, who's playing in the background? Is that you, Gabe?
Oh, That could be a fire truck going by.
Oh, fire truck going by. Yeah. Okay. Just want to remind everybody that if you guys have questions when your image pops up, please unmute yourself and let me know the question. Let Gabe know the question, or else we'll just go ahead and look at it as we typically do for composition and light and processing and everything else. So if you have any specific questions, let me know. All right.
Tim, do you guys have any recommendations like on white balance or like colors, like how to? Is that something that just comes with practice over time to get an eye for that, or yeah, like
on that specific image or just in general?
Yeah, yep, on that image in particular, and then generally too, I guess.
Gabe, you want to finish that up, or you want me to just roll with it into the next one?
Hold on. I mean, I like the colors. The white, again, the balance of that cool and warm are really good with me. Obviously, you can play with it, but I like it, Tim. I don't know if you want to add anything to it, but
yeah, I'll check it out when we when I open up my screen. So let's okay. check it. Let's check it out.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right, everybody seeing me?
Oh, yours is in black and white.
That's because I popped it over into black and white just to see what it would do. Yeah, I too like the color balance. I would almost, it really depends on which way you want to go. So, meaning that I don't think I would change the white balance any, because I like the difference between the blue and orange, and that's kind of what I think Gabe was saying. But you could do such a thing in in HSL, where you're going to take the saturation, say, of this orange color here, and really boost that, which is really going to play against the blue, against the orange, and you could like take these greens and maybe switch their hue over to be a little bit more on the orange side rather than, or reddish rather than green, right? Because now it's more green, now it's more orange. And again, that's playing up against it. But if you wanted to go in the other direction, you could also, take the saturation of your blue and you could drive that down, and then it's going to be less about the color difference between everything. And now you're really just highlighting those orange spots. So you're going to use color to really draw your eye in where you want them to go. Do you want it to be between the orange and the blue, or do you want the upper windows just to sort of fade out and then just be focused on the lower windows? But just remember that color contrast is really going to be, is going to draw your eye. So you can heighten it, or you can, you can squash it a little bit to get more color harmony, say. All right.
Okay. Yep. Cool. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, cool. So whose image do we have here?
TP.
Yep, it's the TP. Brett. Okay, do you have any questions on this, Brett?
No, I'll just give you a comment that these are unedited raw images. So I kind of thought that's what I wanted to submit. So anything you want to do with it, any tips on post-processing would be great as well.
Okay, awesome. Yep, we can do that for sure. All right. So the first thing I always like to look at is, what is the major issue? And, everybody kind of wants a nice workflow to go through here on the post-processing. Unfortunately, there really isn't any really great workflow other than starting at the top and working down. All right. Other than that, I tend to go where the problem is first. So for example, a lot of people say start with your white balance, but we're having a hard time seeing what our white balance is if the image is a little bit too dark, right? So if I go into my exposure and I lift that up just by a couple points, then I could see that, oh yeah, it's a little on the brownish side. So I'm going to pull my temp slider down. And, a lot of us here at NPAN like to shoot right around 3,800 for the Milky Way, somewhere in that neighborhood. Gabe, what do you shoot at 38, don't you?
Yep.
And that seems to, it seems to be like a decent color, kind of a bluish. Now, every camera reacts a little bit differently. And so what I'll do is I'll actually go down to my HSL panel, and this seems a little cyan to me. So I'll take that blue slider and push its hue a little bit more towards the purple. See, like heading up, well, the best thing to do is actually to use your targeted adjustment here and go to somewhere in that, because that's going to be a mix between blue and something else, blue and cyan. And you can see as I'm pushing it, it's getting more purple. And as I go this way, it gets more green. So I tend to like to push it just a little bit towards the purple, just to get that. It's just a look that I like. That is totally subjective. But now let's go back to our basic panel, and we can fool with this a little bit more. Yeah, somewhere in there is looking pretty good to me, I think. 3,600 on this image. Now at this point, what we can do is we can really start pushing our Milky Way to stand out a little bit. And one of the best ways to do that is by using your whites slider. So I may even take my exposure and bring it back to 0, but lift my whites up. And as I do, you can see, you know, if you push it too far, the Milky Way just gets crazy. And there's a lot of images out there that look this way. For me, that's a little overcooked. But the idea is by pushing those whites up, you're starting to brighten the stars and the areas of the Milky Way. And let's see, Gabe, who's not muted? I'm hearing a bunch of background noise. I wonder if that's me or, so that, you know, Brett, that's the one thing that I'm going to do is take those whites up for starters. Now, what you can also do is go with a little bit of dehaze. Now, the more dehaze you put in, the darker it seems to get. But when you counter that with a lift back up in the exposure, you're going to start to see how much of that Milky Way has popped out again. Again, that feels a little overcooked for me. So I'm going to bring that back down and bring my whites back down a little bit. Somewhere in there kind of seems fairly natural. Now we're starting to get a difference between sort of the different colors of the Milky Way along with the sky. And that's kind of the way I approach working with the Milky Way. A little bit of dehaze, really think strongly about your whites and find a good white balance that's going to, you know, so that the color of the sky feels good to you. All right. Brett, how does that feel to you? Is that making sense?
Yeah, it is. It makes a lot of sense. One of the difficulties I have with some of these images is exactly what you did at the beginning, the overcooking it, getting too much and finding that balance and, you know, how to approach it together.
Yeah, once you see it, it's hard to step back from it, you know, because you move it a little bit and you're like, ooh, that's good. You know, if some is good, more is better, right? And so you really start cranking it, and before you know, you lose all sense of reality, and that's really super common. And so, so I'd say kid gloves, you know. And then the other thing you can always do is, let's put this back to 0. I'm going to double click on the tone. You know, if you ever want to see where you've come from, you know, you can go into the YY and then you can start, as you start pushing this exposure up a little bit and changing your whites, you're going to start to see it in real time next to where you started off. And so that can be beneficial as well, you know, to help you not overcook it so much. Okay. And that's pretty much what I would do. Now, for this image, I think that's it. Yeah. And I would say just keep an eye on your sharpness. We are at, let's see, ISO 2500, but the stars are not quite sharp, while the TP is quite sharp. So, and you're at 2.8 on a 14 millimeter lens. And so you're going to really need to watch that focus. When it comes to stars and Milky Way, you know, we kind of want them really to be pretty sharp. So I believe at this distance you are from the TPs with a 14 millimeter lens, you probably could have got them both sharp if you just push that focus a little bit past the TP itself. All right. So yeah, so that's what I would do. Does that feel good, Brett?
It does. Yeah, that's very helpful.
Great. That's awesome. All right. So I'm going to switch it back over to Gabriel here, if I can. There we go.
Awesome. All right. So let me swing on over and let's see who is next. It's, you know, Jeff, who's not in here, so we don't need to unmute anybody. All right. Okay, here we go. We're getting some wonderful landscapes here. This is pretty cool here. This is definitely probably somewhere, it looks like near in Utah, out in that area. They're right there. What a beautiful night sky, right? What a beautiful night sky. What a surreal landscape. We got the Milky Way very low on the horizon and some clouds that are bouncing up that light pollution a little bit in there. But again, going back to Vince's shot, you know, I know there's light pollution filters out there these days, but I kind of like, again, that contrast. It's an added contrast to the scene. We also have, this looks like a car coming in and out, looking at the view, a little bit closer view here. Obviously, these are a little bit tricky and hot spots that are just kind of tough to deal with, you know, and it'd be tough to just fully remove those, and waiting for those might be a challenge, but obviously trying to avoid, I don't mind this part, but obviously the bigger and brighter that hotspot is, the more we're kind of looking over to it, and it's kind of taking us out of the rest of this scene. When I zoom in, the first thing I'm noticing is there is a lot of color noise here. Okay. And I know Jeff has been on some of our other social media channels. This was shot with a Canon 6D, which was a very good camera. It still is. A Canon 6D Mark I is a very good camera for night photography, but 984 seconds, that's over 15-minute exposure. And I am guessing that he did not have his long exposure noise reduction on, because this is a lot of noise. It's either that or it's very hot out. You know, when we're in the desert and it is over 80, 90 degrees, we are probably can't get exposures over 1 or 2 minutes. And sometimes, you know, not even with noise reduction, that doesn't help us. We really have to just limit it to shorter exposures. And, you know, we could look at, you know, again, we could go to the noise reduction and go to color noise and see what it does. And it doesn't do much, you know, and that's just cranking it all the way to that 100%, you know, and we can kind of see it's just taking care of a little bit. So cranking it all the way to 100 is really not. And even if it was doing a better job, it's not taking out the flex. And it'd still be, they'd still be flex. They would be colorless flex, but that's still not anything that any of us want to edit out of it. Again, you can't see it unless you zoom in, so it might not show up as much on a small print, but on a larger print, it is troublesome. So that's just and I'm just going to look at his processing just for a minute. I mean, he did bring up the shadows, but again, none of that with bringing up the shadows or bringing up the exposure was revealing that noise, because we can obviously enhance that when we open up dark shadows like that. We can enhance that noise, but it's not there. I think this is just a case of that of long exposure noise just rearing its ugly head throughout this image. So the only thing, and I see, let's see, this is such a two-part story here anyways, right? And this is a common thing when we have a night sky and a darker landscape. And yep, it looks like we've got a gradient in here, and that's always a good thing to do when you need to process, not think globally and process the whole image, but think of the image in two parts. So it looks like Jeff, with the sky, he upped the highlights and the saturation. Let's see what I don't know if the saturation needs to go up that much. Saturation is also something that because it's still blue there, but I would think of, again, maybe looking at the dehaze. That still adds that contrast and shifts over the blues a little bit more. And I think that's going to do a better job there. And let's take a look at the highlights. I'm gonna bring them down. I like doing a combination of highlights and then sometimes whites themselves, because the whites are the stars, and then we can really kind of just raise those up to really make those pop there. And if you didn't like the color of this cloud, obviously you can go in there and just similar to what Tim was saying, if you want to take down, not tone curve, get this one. We can go in there with that and kind of, if you want to just take it down, I still think it's, you can bring it up more or take it down, depending upon how you want to balance that against the blue. But I like the composition, I like the scene, but I think it's just the long exposure noise, unfortunately, makes this one a tricky one to deal with. All right. I think, Tim, you're still, let me unmute you. There you go.
Grazie.
Prego.
All right, so we've got Sue up here. And let's see what we've got. Almost looks like a daytime image, maybe full moon or something, but it is night because we have some stars in there. So Sue, I know you're along with us in the chat. So I see you there. Looks like not quite sharp here on your stars. 15 millimeter, 6.3. That should be sharp. That really should be sharp. So they're just a little bit off, but everything else is really, is really quite sharp. So I would say you're just going to need to push your focus a little bit further back towards those stars. And what was our exposure? 13 seconds. Yeah. So this is great. I really love the cloud movement through the frame, and I like how the cloud echoes the stream, the S curve in the stream. So, the stream is really moving us up right up to the clouds. And I think that's cool. I believe that is actually the heart of the matter. And what I mean by that, that to me is your real composition. So we've got a little bit of looks like the railing over the bridge coming in here, but really this area in here, Sue, is quite vacant and doesn't really help to tell the story of the cloud and the stream. And so when we go in and crop, and I'm going to hit crop, and then I'm going to tap L to go lights out, so we have a nice view of what we're doing here. Oops, let me escape out of that. Tap my L key again because I want to turn off the lock. All right, now watch as we move this over. And we just start really thinking about the curve of the water and the cloud. And I think we can see that does a much nicer job of bringing us into the heart of the matter. All right. Then I think what I would probably do is try to darken down some of these areas that are bright, because they're a little bit distracting. What I want to see bright is these clouds, this stream, and this brightness is just fine. So I would probably do this with a local adjustment brush, but just because we're kind of going down and dirty, I'm going to use a graduated filter, double click on effect, reset, drag this up. And then I'm going to start by dragging my highlights down. All right. And then I'm going to lower my exposure a little bit. And you can see now it's just a touch darker. And I think that's helping us move quicker into the background and not get hung up on the brighter colors or the brighter tones in the foreground, so to speak. Now, of course, I would take my brush. Whoops, I'm sorry. Go back to that. I would take the brush part of it here and put it on erase and show my selected mask overlay, and probably take it out of anywhere in that stream that it was the mask was going over. So we'll just kind of get rid of that in there, and that's why I would do it in the first place with an adjustment brush to begin with. So now we've got the water showing through, and we've got the foreground a little bit darker, and then I would probably go in with a brush and bring up some whites in this value down here and just kind of start painting through the stream. And notice I used whites again rather than exposure, because exposure is going to bring up all the value in the midtones, whereas the whites are just concentrating on the brighter tones and bringing them up. And when you see that before and after, you could see that the river has gotten a little bit brighter, but not overall. Like if we did it with exposure, which would just look a little bit more false, it looks more flat as well. So by adding in the whites, you're increasing the contrast in addition to brightening at the same time. So those are the major things that I think that I would do with that Sue. Also, I would probably tone these down, with a brush, or clone them out, because there are 3 bright spots in a field of darkness that's surrounding it. And so, again, with the local adjustment brush, you can darken them down quite a bit. We'll create a new mask, and this time really bring those down a little bit. And again, bring the highlights down, and you could just kind of paint in there and, kind of cover them up. That's a bit heavy handed, but you get the idea. So either darken them down a little bit like that, or go in and actually clone them out. All right. Sue, did you have any other questions?
Hold on, I'm monitoring the YouTube. She just commented at the beginning 2 things. I asked her if it was Bryce, which she said, of course, yes.
Okay.
And that this was a lot of moonlight this night.
Yeah.
So yes, hence the daylight, which you kind of pointed out at the beginning. That's always sort of the challenge with the full moonlight is, how do we make it look still like the night?
Yeah. And the other way we can do that, Sue, is we can drop our temperature down a little bit. And the more blue that we make it, the more it's going to feel like night, so you can, you can just drop that down a little bit like that. And that certainly feels more like night as well. Again, that's a subjective call. But I think adding some more blue in there is okay. Cool. Good
and
job.
Then Steve Barnes also commented on YouTube. He didn't know we could erase the gradient tool, which that is definitely a very powerful thing.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right. So let me find, I'm jumping between screens, and the YouTube one looks just like the other one. There we go. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen. And okay. There we go. And Christina, you are up.
Yep, except this one's Dawn's.
Okay, Don, you are up.
I'd be up. So
is this Lawson?
No, that's Mount Bachelor and Sparks Lake outside of Bend, Oregon. And that blown out light behind that cloud is
Bend. And that's Bend, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a problem. Yeah, definitely. And it's not, obviously it looks like that was hanging out there for a long time. So let's see. Well, let's see what the clone and healing brush will do. Now, something like this, when I want to get in there, I want to zoom in as much as I can, and the image isn't going to look good. But again, we're just talking about, hey, can I take these whites and just make them yellow here? So let's try that first. And sometimes it's best to do this just incrementally. And we could kind of see that because we don't want it to be so white. We don't mind it being a little bright, but where it's picking from can sometimes be, maybe we can kind of shift it over here. Yeah, it's picking up some of these, the pixels that don't exist. So let me shift. I shift between sometimes clone and heal does a good job for me a lot of the time. Clone I generally like better in Photoshop, but it looks like it's doing an okay job here. And again, we can also look at, just also remember that we've got, size, feather, and opacity. So opacity being up 100% is going to do 100% of it. Sometimes I might take that down a little bit and see how it does over here. And it just sometimes, and I'm just doing this a little quicker even than I might, but that's starting to look much better, right? And again, we're zoomed out. So let's see now if we're looking at it on a very pixel basis here. Let me see if I can go in there. Kind of, there we go. Maybe that looks a little bit better. And let's go back to just looking at this. That's a little bit easier on the eyes, right? We got rid of that hot spot, and it's still going to be bright with there, but we don't want it to be a gray, which is kind of when we take these blown out highlights and try to use exposure or highlights and whites to bring them down when there's no information. The only way we can kind of do that is to really get in there and using the clone heal tool in Lightroom, or if you have Photoshop, those results are going to be even a little bit better than that. I think, Lightroom's clone and heal has definitely matured. I used to never use it. And now I will give it a go with it. And it did a pretty good job. We could still clean that up a little bit more. It looks like, maybe getting rid of that dark spot a little bit more. And if you think about it with Photoshop, you can really get in there and kind of then just be but the key is picking smaller areas and really backing up and looking at it zoomed in and 1-to-1. So you could kind of really play with these brightness gradations, so that it looks normal to us. So, yeah, but that looks good. Let's see, what are we looking at on this one? Okay, yeah, I don't have any of the information on this. Besides that, I think this is a very nice composition, really nice reflection you got in there, and this is handled very nicely. We're getting a little bit of purple over here, at least what I'm seeing.
Yes.
And I would be a little wary of that. I think that might be coming from our vibrance and saturation. So I'm just going to take those down. And yeah, that saturation was really hitting it up here. The better way, I mean, I always use vibrance very gingerly. I usually never go above 10 and even above 5. I do like vibrance, but again, I might hit that up to like maybe 20 or 30 tops there. So just, use that accordingly. With that, again, you can also kind of be affecting specific colors in the HSL panel, which again, it looks like you've done that as well. We've got a bunch of mixtures, and we got luminance as well as saturation here. But I don't know. I mean, I'm going to take a little look here. And boy, I don't know. Just doing a quick look. It doesn't look bad as a black and white. I don't know. I mean, it's you're missing obviously the light pollution, but this looks a little bit more dramatic. The cloud with it. The Milky Way, of course, you're missing sort of that the color of the Milky Way, but this here is now we're looking, more at the form and the composition a little bit more, and the color isn't drawing us in or out either way on that. So, and we can probably get rid of that little, get rid of that. We can remove that little color in there too. But yeah, let's bring that back up to where it was right there. I will say it's hard for me to tell, but I would say that there's definitely something going on with the stars. And I just don't know if it's a little bit longer of an exposure, but looking at these stars over here, I don't know if there was maybe I don't know, everything looks sharp, but the stars kind of have a little funky movement to them that makes me think something was bumped maybe at the beginning or at the end where only the bright parts saw that. But I would take a look at your original file here. This is not really letting me get in there. Hold on, let me see. Boom. Yeah, that's my 1-to-1.
Is this a merge of 2 images?
No, that's a single. This is my second time ever doing a night photo shoot.
Okay,
oh, cool.
Yeah, well,
cool.
that's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, Um, no, this and it's a great scene. It just with those I just it's just something strange because the trees look super sharp, right? The trees look sharp, and Mount Bachelor looks sharp, but there's just like those stars. Some, not all of them, but these stars right over here have got a little tail to them that just got me. It's kind of making me wonder what something happened with it. But overall, great positioning, great composition, great reflection, and thank you for submitting. Any other questions you had on it?
No, you helped me a lot. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Let's see what we got here. Okay. Okay. This is Julianne. Okay, Julianne, I think, is also with us in the chat. Cool. Gabe, can you mute yourself, bud?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. All right. Okay, cool. So we've got some nice light painting going on here, and perfect Milky Way coming up through this mountain. That's awesome. Let's start with the Milky Way, and this is a DNG, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So let's start with the Milky Way. I like the color of your sky. The stars, Julianne, are not quite sharp. We know how hard that is, especially at 2.8. But of course, boy, look at that. That's tack sharp. So, you could have maybe gone to, like 3.5 or something just to get a little bit more depth of field. But I would expect that at 18 millimeter, you should probably be able to get both of the, both the fence and the Milky Way sharp. Yeah, again, just pushing that back just a touch. But I like the color of the sky, and I think your processing is good. Although you're sacrificing, I believe, some of the Milky Way prominence to control this. And what I mean by that is I see you've got your whites pulled way down here and your exposure pushed up. So let's just double click this again and bring this down. Okay, so it's got a nice white glow there. That is from the dehaze. Yep, so that dehaze is putting that glow around that edge there. So, and clarity is up pretty high too at 43. Okay, so let's start this again. I think, Julianne, what you're going to want to do here is separate out the sky from the foreground and just kind of process them differently. So let's grab a gradient filter and just pull it down through here like that. And what we'll then do is we'll now process the sky in the gradient filter. So what we'll do is we'll bring up our whites now, which is going to make the Milky Way pop out even a little bit more. And then we can bring up our dehaze in this area. And we don't want to go too much because it's going to really start to separate this sky glow. And then we could even cool it off a little bit if you wanted to, not too terribly much, somewhere in there. And you could also lift up your exposure a touch to make the sky feel a little bit brighter if you wanted. Now, because of this sky glow, what we could do is we can lift this up and take some of that out of there. And you can see how that now there, it's a more gentle gradient through there without getting that sky glow really much more prominent, which is coming when we increase the whites and increase the dehaze. So I'm thinking that's looking a little bit better in there. Now what we can do is we can really deal with the bottom. So you had lowered your highlights. So my assumption is that you're trying to darken this down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the gradient and I'm going to go to new and create a new gradient and just go through here like that. And I never worry too much about doing it right the first time when I pull it out, because it's just so much easier to adjust it later on. All right, now let's reset this. Now, if you want to bring your highlights down, you can start dropping them down in that way. And you can see now the fence really, the fence starts to pop out even a little bit more, even though it's darker than it was before. but this area I think is more well tamed. And then the other thing I would do is I would probably go in with a brush, Julianne, and again lower the highlights. But this time I'll just paint that area. Whoops, sorry, I'm still on the gradient. Sorry. Now I'm going to go to create a new brush and lower those highlights and go in and paint that ground down some. And so what we could also do there is take some of that saturation out, and that'll help keep our eye away from it. So it looks a little bit more like the color on the fence itself. And yeah, and maybe just bring that exposure down a touch. And now to me, the fence is really the prominent feature that you're light painting. So I think in this case, Julianne, when you were light painting, I think you just needed to keep your flashlight further up in the air and off of the ground. And that will keep that ground from getting really bright. And then it would just be on the stick fence. So really, really nicely done. Good job. Do you have any other questions on that, Julianne? No? Okay. All right, Gabriel, you're muted. I unmuted you now. Gabriel, you're muted, bud.
There we go.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, where are we here? I'm juggling. And by the way, I was Julianne was complimenting your gradient skills.
Oh,
when I was monitoring over there. So
grand.
she was, yeah. So she was saying, thank you, good job. And why am I not finding my Zoom screen here? That is my issue.
It's the one with all the people on it, Gabriel.
Yeah, that I'm getting it confused with my YouTube screen, which also has a lot of people on it. But where did it go? Where did I put it? Hold on. Why is it? This didn't go to a different desktop. Hold on.
Do you want me to take the next one while you figure that out?
No, I got it back. I got it back.
Okay.
I don't know where it went, but I've got it back. I'm back. All right. So here we go. Sharing the screen.
Excellent.
Old school, new school, night sky school. Okay. All right, here we go. And this is Brett. Brett, you're up again.
And again, this is an unedited raw.
Where's this shot?
This is Grand Prismatic at Yellowstone.
Nice, beautiful. Yep. So first things, right? Yeah. First thing I would say is it's pretty dark, right? So we're definitely going to need to open things up a little bit, and just when we're out in the field and doing the night shooting, just being aware of looking at those histograms. So this is the histogram we see. Or would see something similar to this on the back of our screen, and just making sure, remember when we're viewing our images on the back of the screen of our camera, they're backlit, right? So they're going to be a little bit brighter, and depending upon how bright our LCD screen is, they could look better. And the histogram only lies 2 to 5% of the time, because still the histogram is reading off of the JPEG, but when I look at this histogram, it's as we can see, and we hover above it, all that blue that's right there being highlighted, that is black without detail, and that's going to be very hard for us to get back. The solution here, obviously, we like to play with the shadows and the highlights a little bit, but that's not doing much. So we're going to have to get into exposure, and let's see, and now look at the histogram as I start to shift this. And you can see I still don't mind some of it kind of coming off here, but it should make it, and this is too much, we're over 2 stops, but I would think that something around there So this is almost a stop and a half more than what you had in your exposure. This is what we should have had out of the camera. Something that looks like this, at least the histogram, and then hopefully it looks something similar to that in the in the back of the screen too. This is just going to give us more information for us to play with as well. Even though we made this histogram look like this, again, we're really dealing with this much information here, which is going to be less, and we're squeezing out that by opening up that exposure there. But that lets us now see, we really couldn't see, the steam, and the steam is one of the stars of the show. I mean, obviously the stars is the Milky Way here, but that steam is part of that story, the horizon. And this is really nice over here. I love this light over here, and the detail and the information we're getting in there. And we really did not see that prior. Now, this would also benefit if we're just going to look at just a basic processing. When I see this, to me, this is a little too, we shot this almost at daylight. We're looking at a Kelvin of 5,150. So that is giving us colors that are a little bit warmer, a little bit yellow, and I'm seeing some green in here that I would prefer to tone down. So I'm going to kind of take it down. Tim's, we 3,800 is nice. Really, 4,000, I believe, is around 4,000 is what the true Milky Way, 4,000, between 4,000 and 4,400 is what a true Milky Way should look like. But I tend to like things a little cooler. And then we can still see that green's in there. So I'm going to come in and bring up that magenta a little bit over there. And now we're kind of building a little bit of that contrast and balance there. And I'm going to kind of settle in. For me, that looks really nice right there. Again, with white balance, it's cooking to taste. But what was happening prior to that was that it was all the same tonality. So that wasn't giving us that contrast, which that gives us the depth of the scene. So we can get depth with color and with contrast just as much as we can with the apertures, and the depth we get with shooting it. So I wanted to point that out. We can really, again, kind of see the difference there with those. Looking around at the rest of this, again, we can kind of play a little bit with the highlights. Again, I might bring up those whites a little bit more. And over here, again, going down to clarity. And I'm looking at this globally right here, which it's acting pretty nice the whole time. And let's just see what the haze gives it a little bit more. So I'm going to actually take down the clarity and kind of stick with the haze right there. And that's looking pretty good. So I might go in here with a brush and let's see what we can do. Again, with bringing up maybe, and I'm going to, whoop, that's a little too much. So I'm going to delete that. But let's see, I'm going to put my flow. Again, flow is that opacity again. So I'm going to take the flow and I just want to kind of bring out this, see if I can kind of just create a little bit more contrast with that steam, with that brush. And that's still a little bit more than I want, but I think a little bit like that right there. And maybe we can play with our whites to see, just to give that just a little bit more. And we can kind of see now that texture and everything in there with that. And then for a final little quick edit touch, I am going to, because this was shot at 2,500, because we had to raise it up a stop, we are accentuating a little bit of the noise in the scene. And I'm going to just take my luminance noise up. And I always like to, when I'm doing luminance noise, I always like to be viewing at 100%. And I like to, for night stuff, I like to look at the skies. Because again, without the noise, we're seeing the granular quality throughout the whole sky, right? And I don't want to, we can see it here too. So we can kind of see, let's show both here. And I'll go to that luminance noise. And I want to kind of try to just alleviate some of that. I don't want to go all the way, right? We go all the way and it's just, you know, way too much. But I'm thinking somewhere around that 15, 20 points. And that just kind of cleans up that image a little bit more as well. And then we could play with this. I like this as the tonality is. It's kind of subtle and enough there. And again, a nice like little balance in here. But, you know, thinking globally and then going in locally to make adjustments to further push it. But I like this image a lot. Kudos. It's been a Milky Way tastic night. And yeah, this is a nice one.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very.
All right. So Gabriel, what we're going to need to do is, if we look in the video feed on in YouTube, our video is in the upper right-hand corner and it's covering the histogram. And
Okay.
so what we all need to do is, if everybody could turn off their video feeds, that would be great, including yourself, Gabriel.
Okay.
So just hit stop video. And
Oh, and then the speaker, whoever's speaking, he can put his over the left-hand side.
okay, excellent. So that's good. Now, that should be good. So Gabe, just keep an eye on the video feed, but I think that should now keep our all the video off of Lightroom. So we've got let's see, we've got Jeff here. Okay, Jeff.
And Jeff's here.
Yep, I saw that. So that's awesome. Great star trails. This is just wonderful. Look at how beautiful that is. And we've got exposure of, let's see, wow, a whole bunch of seconds, 1,200 seconds. If somebody knows math like Gabriel, you can tell me how long that was, but that's a good long time. And that's creating beautiful star trails. It looks like you're looking to the east. So here's looking north, here's looking south, and where these two converge. Isn't that really cool that we can see all that? I love that look to star trails.
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Thank you for that, Gabriel. And I think, you know, this foreground is really quite lovely. I actually might consider a subtle crop on this, Jeff, because we see this little bit of a ridge coming in, and really this is kind of the hero of the area. And when we start to see this circle, it draws our eye up to it because we want to kind of finish that circle. And so if we go into the crop, and just bear with me, I know this may not be your vision because you may have wanted that star part of that star circle in it, but by eliminating this and moving over to the left, I think we're going to start highlighting more the, to me, that really begins to highlight the divergence of these stars. And so I would lobby for a crop like that. Now, that does remove that corner, and you may like that, and it's, you know, it's not quite a 2x3 any longer, and you know, you may not like that, and that's okay. You know, cropping can be pretty subjective, but I think that's what I would do. Then the other thing I would do is I would probably clone out a few of these brighter spots, just because they're kind of, you know, I don't mind the ones in the background that are, you know, showing there's a city back there because we can see some noise pollution, so we know that's there. But these other ones in the foreground, what it may be campers or boats or whatever, I think going in, and let's put this on heal and go in and get rid of some of those. And that was a really bad clone, but sorry about that. I don't want to take up all the time just simply cloning your image, but I think you'll see that when you remove some of these lights, it's going to be just a touch stronger. Okay, and so let me zoom back out and just look at the difference between here and here, and you can see those with those spots gone. It allows us to move through the photograph back into the stars instead of being caught up by the brighter lights that are kind of drawing our eyes in the foreground. So that's the other thing I would do. Now, like the other image that we looked at, Jeff, you've got a lot of long exposure noise in here, and this is really super difficult to fix. Like you could go in and you could clone out that one and these bigger ones, but this little stuff in here is really, really difficult to fix. Even, you can go in and try your hand at noise reduction, but it'll just turn it to a plasticky kind of look to fix that. So we're not seeing, we're seeing a little bit in the sky, a couple little places, but it's not terrible. So I would say, if you're going to really run these longer exposures, then you should consider doing either dark frame subtraction in Photoshop afterwards, or putting on your long exposure noise reduction right after right before you're ready to really pull this real long exposure. So Jeff, do you have any questions?
Jeff was commenting to crop away. One of the troubles when obviously shooting these amazing landscapes, you want to shoot wide, right?
Yeah. And
so
that's it. Yep. And my theory on cropping, for those of you that know me, know that I don't mind cropping an image as long as you're cropping just off the long edge, and what I mean by that is here I cropped off the long edge of the frame, and that's okay. If you were having to crop in like on all four sides, or the short edge and the long edge, then you probably should have used a different lens. But I have no problem going from a 2x3 to a 5x7 to a 4x5 to make the image look its best. So yeah. All right, Gabriel, back to you, buddy.
So do I start my video for this, or don't even start it for this?
Nope, you don't need to. Just share your screen.
Boom. Okay, here we go. Sharing my screen. I found my screen. All right, and this is Sue Wilson. And Sue, I know that you're in YouTube, so if you have any comments, shoot them over. Tim will check them out, and we will relay them from there. This looks beautiful. Is this glacier? Is glacier-ish? It's kind of cool.
Sure looks like glacier. Yes, it is, right? Glacier.
Yeah. Okay. Really, wow. It's looks really clean here. One thing I'm noticing though is, and this is so hard to balance, is we definitely, I like your choice of putting the North Star, not in the center, in the corner. I love the stars just getting longer as we go, as we move away from the north, move to the east, here. And I love it. It's a good positioning here, and you have to be aware, and it's so hard to kind of pinpoint Polaris sometimes, but we have a wonderful reflection here, but I'm not seeing all of it. And I want like another half an inch to an inch, and it's not there, right? I know you did a little bit of a crop, but I don't see that there. Let's just reset just to make sure. Yeah, even this is kind of too tight, because this reflection just heightens this over here, so one more step back, or Mother May I take, one more, giant step back there, makes that really work, and is just going to make it a little bit more powerful. I was already wowed by it, by the star trails and by the scenic beauty of this location, but you've got a reflection in front of you, and you just want to again, amplify that more by just including all of it. It's really, really beautiful. All right, so let's talk, let's see, what else here? I love the lights on the side here and the boats. This is awesome, right? Over here, and this is good here. Is it too bright? Like these, you know, we're never gonna, and these are a little farther away. And this is me being a little bit nitpicky, but just because it's along the edge and it is a bright light source, which I don't mind this, and plus there's a little bit of wiggle room, but this line right here, which then makes me see this line, just a little bit too bright. And how can we control that in the field? It can be difficult because this exposure is going to be at least anywhere from 5 to 10 stops, you know, lower than what our exposure should be for the ambient light in the scene. And one thing you might want to consider, and this is also especially helpful with boats that move, is that, but these aren't bad right here, is to maybe for this shot, it's a blend and you're taking a different shot for those brighter light sources in the scene, and we can blend them in post with that. That would be, that's again another sort of just elevating. I think it's good as it is, but we're gonna level you up here. And then the final thing, it looks like there was a break. And it's, you know, it looks like we've got, you know, at least an hour, 45 minutes. And then there was, looks like maybe you or your camera took a 4-minute break, and then we started up again. So, you know, it's not bad. I mean, and I don't think anyone but a night photographer would notice it. It's again, not star braille, but we could just, these are just perfect. That is the same star, and it would look better, you know, with them either connected that way, or what I might do is maybe try to find out where that break is, see if those images are somehow missing, or try it again, stack them together with just this long star trail and see what it looks like, you know. Let's see, finally, let's just take a look, because again, this is a moonlit night. Let's just see, we're just taking down the general exposure just a little bit. I'm going to take down my highlights a little bit, but I'm going to bring up my whites to just sort of bring up those stars and create a little contrast there. And then take down the color temperature. Just a little, it's getting too blue there. But that just gives it just a titch more of the night feel. I'm going to also, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to just bring down that dehaze just a little bit. You had it up to 44. I'm just going to bring it up to there, 32. But yeah, I think, again, composition on point, except just adding that reflection. Beautiful, sharp image, well composed with the stars, and bringing in just a couple other leveling up techniques turns this from, you know, maybe a 3-4 star to that 5-star shot. Any questions, Tim?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, then I will throw it back to you.
Okay. Gabe, can you see my screen and hear me okay?
I can.
Excellent. Perfect. Ooh, fun. That is, wow, that is an angel. Mushroom alien, an angel. All right, Julianne, very cool. Great job of light writing. As you well know, this is not something that I do, and certainly not something I do very well at all. And you've done a really cool job of it here. I love, yeah, you know, it just literally looks as if, you know, the angel is talking to this alien. I think it's a great concept. I really do. As far as cropping goes, I might just come in just a little bit to get rid. Oh, and you have, that's great. Just to get rid of this corner, because it's kind of a high contrast corner there. And so I might just kind of take that up and I tap L again to go to lights out. You can see as we're starting to bring that out. Yeah, I don't know. That's scrunching the angel a little bit. I'd say right there is probably pretty good. And that just, I think that cleans it up just a touch. Now, in this case, your background is really nice and sharp. And you can see how the focus was missed though on this, because we're seeing a sharpness here, and but yet this rock is not sharp, and you can see it really well right here how your focus is beyond. So you would need to bring your focus back a little bit to get this sharp. So even the highlights themselves of the, and you say Christmas lights, that's awesome, is just a little bit soft. And again, you can see the mountains are sharp in the back. So when you go and recreate this again, make sure that you're absolutely tack sharp, in the foreground. And in a case like this, because the foreground is so strong and so powerful, the night sky in the background is really just a secondary subject. So we really want to be sure that we're sharp on this rather than necessarily keeping the background sharp. And that's going to be the most important thing. So let's see, as far as processing though, I think it's really pretty nice. I think the only thing I might do is kind of lancify this, which means just add some gradient to it or some vignetting. And you can always go in under effects and use the vignette here. But I think that you can definitely do that and it works. And it looks like you already did do some vignetting. So I think you did a good job, because I barely even noticed it. So I would take it just a touch down a little bit more. Okay. Now that's just one way to use the vignetting. I actually, I don't use this vignetting in here at all. What I do now is I go up to my gradient or my radial filter and I use that because what that allows you to do is change the shape. So you can put it wherever you want. It doesn't have to be dead center like the vignette tool is. And the larger this is, the softer the radial tool, the gradient will be. And so, you can lower your exposure and see that that's happening on the outside. And you can see I'm kind of oval shaped now rather than circular like the vignette tool automatically does for you. And so that's a bit heavy handed, of course, but I think once we get it back to closer to that, you're really starting to now just sort of zoom in and look at the angel. It even makes it more powerful. So I see, Julianne, that you said stopping down the f-stop. Would that have helped? Probably not in this case, because you're pretty far off. You're definitely focused out here. And this is, you're focused somewhere way out in the distance. Where does it start to fall off? Falls off here. Yeah, so you're focused out in here. It looks like maybe you're on autofocus or something and it caught something in the background. Hard to say, but stopping down in this case wouldn't have helped. It's just a matter of actually getting the focus right before you begin, and then just putting it into manual focus so it doesn't pop out on you. But what a great job painting that angel. That's just so cool. So Julianne, did you have any other questions? No? Okay. All right, it's back to you, Gabriel. Are you there, Gabriel? Gabriel. We lost Gabe. What happened? All right.
Hold on.
Oh, okay.
It's just, I don't know what happens. For me, I think I try to find the zoom when you're like releasing it and then it goes lost on my screen here. So let me just try to, it's not anywhere on my desktop or on a different desktop. So I just got to kind of reopen it again. So hold on 1 second. Let me just do this. Bear with me. And this is it looks like our last shot of the night. Um, okay, here we go. And I'm going to share my screen and go over to Lightroom Classic. And we have this cool shot, which this is Christina.
This is me.
Excellent. Is this in the bachelor area as well, or?
Well, we live in Bend. This is the other direction.
Okay, cool.
This is, the Deschutes River and Steelhead Falls.
Well, that is a beautiful scene here. I love those waterfalls. This is just a really, really lovely scene. Nice composition. I love, we have the, obviously well composed here, and it just kind of spills out right there. Nice lines of the horizon. Dealing with Bend, which is a beautiful place, but obviously has a little bit of light pollution, especially when those clouds roll in and it just gets, again, amplified a little bit more.
Yeah.
Would have been definitely, if you get a clear night, I would definitely go back to this location because that Milky Way lines up really nicely over that waterfall. So
we go every year.
Excellent. So let's take a closer look here, because what I'm seeing, unfortunately, I think something happened with the focus on this, and what I will say is this is a very hard area to focus, right? Anyways, whether it's manually or I don't think any autofocus could have worked here. Would you remember how you focused with this? Did you zoom in with your live view, or did you shine a flashlight and focus, or?
I think oh my goodness, I don't remember, but probably focused on one of the stars.
Okay. And you shot this with an 11 millimeter lens. Okay. But I think what I'm seeing is it's past infinity. The focus kind of went past infinity,
Yeah.
which means nothing is in focus on this, which I think we can still work with this, because for me, when this happens, it has a dreamy quality to it, right? So maybe we go in and just enhance that dreamy quality of it until the next time we can go to this location when it's a super clear night for it. But let's see what you've done here, okay? Like the white balance over here, that's a good choice here. So you brought up our exposure, okay? Yep. So what that's telling me, you went up to 1.28 on this thereabouts. So we were about a stop underexposed for this. And so just, again, keeping an eye on that histogram. Let's see what it was. Now, it's not that bad of a histogram, but this ISO 500, what camera are you using?
This was with the crop sensor, Nikon D7100.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So, right, that camera, I usually would probably max out at that camera at 1600 ISO. 3200 can be tricky, but usually the highest I would go with that. And this is not a moonlit scene. Most ISOs we kind of have to let fly a little bit for two reasons on these sort of dark sky scenes. One is that's an acceptable way to get more light in. 45 seconds, that is going to, though you can't tell as much here, but that 45 seconds is really going to elongate our stars, right? So we won't be able to get star points. We'll get little either oblong stars or the beginnings of a star trail. So always, if you see the scene as a star point shot, We've done a couple blogs, and there's a couple you can use that use the 400 rule to figure it out, which would be dividing with a crop sensor 11 millimeter into 250. So you're looking at like 20, 25 seconds is your maximum exposure.
Sure.
For that.
I think actually I stacked this in Sequator.
You stacked it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which
So
is
we might.
why I had the lower ISO, and it reads as
Okay.
longer
Okay.
exposure.
So probably this foreground was the lower ISO and the sky was fine. Okay. Yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. Okay, well, I'm gonna then disregard the that, but just a good information. It does look like the stars are, it's hard to say with the focusing or again or not, but again, just good rule of thumb. If you're not using that 400 rule, that's a good starting point for it. Let's take a look. We went up with the whites. Let's see, maybe. Yeah, and what I would also, if this is a stack and we're doing one shot for this, it might want to get even a little bit more information. And it's so hard to tell when we're going to combine these. And sometimes I do take one at, 2-3 stops more exposure than the sky, and then I might do a couple brackets just to give me options for it. We are seeing a little bit of that color noise. That seems to be an ongoing theme tonight of it. So when we do those shots, making sure we turn that noise reduction on, again, not for the sky, but for the landscape. And it's a lot to juggle, but have that checklist of things there. All right. So looking at the presence panel, let's just take, so we got all those. Let's see what happens. Let's take a different look at it here. And we'll go back over to this, and there you go. And let's kind of take these down a little bit and see where, let's see. And I'm thinking this kind of is playing a little bit more into the dreamlike quality of it a little bit more. If we kind of, dreams are a little bit softer, so we could kind of play into that a little bit. I'm not sure the vibrance or saturation needs to come up, or at least if it comes up, I like this clouds way better here than over here. So perhaps if we want to do something like that, we bring up, a gradient on this one. And just kind of play with that. If we want to kind of bring up a little bit more of that saturation over there. And that'll just we can play with that. We can add a little bit, kind of play with that. And that's creating a little bit more contrast, and it just makes it a little bit smoother. I'm also this rock is it's kind of competing in brightness, right? So what I might do with that rock, again, is take a brush and we'll take our highlights down, and I might just kind of come in here, and it's really just, I don't mind that tree there. So I'm going to kind of try to not hit that tree. But what I'll do is with that, kind of just bring that down a little bit, maybe a titch with the exposure. Just a little bit right there. And that way it's just not competing. We really want to play around in that waterfall more so than the rock there. And that just kind of takes that down right there. Cool. Anything else? Any questions?
No, it's like everybody's having trouble with that focusing. So
yeah, so focusing tips, right? Focusing on the stars. And that's a tough one. I just think you missed the focus on the stars. I think that is the right thing to do in this scenario. You're at least 40 to 60 feet away from that waterfall, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
right? You know, so generally with an 11 millimeter lens, which is still a 15, 16 millimeter lens on a full frame, if you're focusing at, you know, 20, 30 feet away and you focus on that foreground or somewhere just past that, you're going to get everything going all the way through, you know. But you know, when we focus on the stars, we just got to really take our time. A tip for, you know, zoom, you know, use your live view, and really zoom into the back of that, you know, that star, or that looks like probably a planet right there. Use that brightest source, and then rock that, you know, that focus back and forth. And when it is its smallest, that's when it is its sharpest. And again, you can go past infinity, and it's like, when you go past infinity, then everything is out of focus. But so just rocking it back and forth between a little bit going past infinity and going to infinity. And with zoom lenses, especially, that infinity marker is not accurate. So it's always best to find it ourselves and either tape it down or mark it accordingly. I use a grease pencil for the new infinity line on my primes if it's off from the other ones. So, and then, or if you know you're going to be doing a composite, and this is a fairly easy image to do a composite, is I would do one focus of the sky and then shine a flashlight, you know, talk to the people you're shooting with, so that's not in your shot, but get a focus, a very sharp focus of this waterfall, you know, turn on your autofocus, let the autofocus kind of find the contrast, like go somewhere over here where there is contrast, shine the flashlight on there, put your autofocus point, press halfway down, lock in that focus, overexpose that so you get more detail, more information. And then this ridge line is pretty easy for you to, again, blend those together as a composite. And then you have the two properly exposed, properly focused images to put together.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And
All
also,
right.
I'm not sure if you saw in the chat window, I just posted 2 links. One is to all of our blog posts, and the other is to a specific post on how to focus in the dark. 8 tricks on how to focus in the dark. And if you go in there, you'll be able to, you know, you'll be reminded of the things that Gabe just told you and a few other things as well.
Thank you for doing that, Tim.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, my pleasure.
And I think everyone who's still in the Zoom room, we should turn our video on. There we go. And again, guys, wanted to thank you all for submitting your images and letting us share them with the world and give you some feedback. Hopefully we can take this feedback. I know a couple people, or actually most of us, seem to be close to those locations. Brett, I don't know how close you are to Yellowstone there, but not too bad.
I live in Montana, so the first shot tonight was Glacier and the second was Yellowstone.
Okay, so it was fairly in our backyards. So guys, these are great examples, great starting points. Everyone made a great effort, but also can build on it. And we look forward to seeing your progression.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming. Brett, where are you in Montana?
I live in Stevensville.
Oh, you're right down the road from me.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I've done a few of your workshops. I've been doing things at the Rocky Mountain School for a long time.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Brett. All right. Yeah. So again, thank you everybody for joining. And again, a call out to everybody out in the YouTube world that wants to submit images. Keep your eye on our channel here and Twitter feed, and we'll be able to alert you to when we're taking images for our next critique. And I think that's probably already open, isn't it, Gabriel?
Yeah, let me actually just post. Do we have this? Yeah, here we go. It's where you're going to post that. And this is, I'm going to post 2 links in the YouTube. First is, you guys can always find all our live streaming events, because we do ones on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I just posted that link in there. And then in the specific image review, is npan.co /night crew. And I'll just do this, submit your images for the next image review. Boom. And Ed, yeah, we'll take a look. I know Ed had said he'd submitted something, but we didn't see him in there, but we'll take a look to see if it didn't pop up, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week.
All
Thank you,
right.
Gabe. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, you so very, very welcome.
Yes.
We'll see you all next time.
All right.